Sign it." The word fell across the obsidian desk like a blade. Ronald Sullivan stood on the other side of Claire Kensington's office, his face pale from exhaustion, his navy suit wrinkled from a night spent in a hospital chair, his hands trembling at his sides because he knew this was not just a job anymore. This was his daughter's life. High above Manhattan, inside the private executive floor of Aegis Global Logistics, the rain struck the windows in silver lines, turning the city outside into a blur of cold light and moving shadows. Claire Kensington did not look at the rain. She did not look at the cardboard box already waiting near the door. She looked only at the termination papers in front of her signature sharp and final beneath the company letterhead. At 34, Claire was one of the most powerful women in America, founder and CEO of a global shipping empire that moved surgical machines, transplant materials, defense equipment, and emergency supplies across 6 continents. Wall Street called her the Iron Queen. Her employees called her brilliant when she was in the room and merciless when she wasn't. Today, Ronald Sullivan learned that both names were true. "Ms. Kensington," he said, his voice raw, "please, I'm not asking you to ignore what happened. Suspend me. Demote me. Cut my pay. Put me in the warehouse. I'll work nights, weekends, holidays. I'll do anything. Just don't terminate me." Claire lifted her eyes slowly. They were pale gray, calm, and cold enough to make a desperate man feel ashamed of begging. "Mr. Sullivan, one missed authorization delayed a $50 million shipment of cryogenic surgical robotics bound for Johns Hopkins. 36 hours on a Frankfurt tarmac. 3 hospitals affected. 1 international client threatening litigation. Aegis does not survive on excuses. It survives on reliability." Ronald swallowed hard. His throat felt lined with glass. "I was in the pediatric ICU. My daughter went into cardiac arrest yesterday morning. She's 7 years old. Her name is Lily. She has severe aplastic anemia. I was standing beside her bed while doctors shocked her chest. I didn't have my company phone in my hand because I was holding her foot and praying she would breathe again." For the first time, the room shifted. The young legal assistant by the door lowered her gaze. One of the 2 security guards near the glass wall looked away. Even Richard Vale, Claire's polished chief operations officer, stopped tapping his thumb against his tablet. But Claire's face did not change. She had trained herself long ago to remove softness from decision-making. Softness delayed. Softness weakened. Softness invited betrayal. "I sympathize with your family situation," she said, and the lie was so smooth it almost sounded professional. "But this is a Fortune 500 corporation, not a charity ward." Ronald stared at her. "Her transplant is scheduled next week. My health insurance is tied to this job. If I lose coverage now, the hospital postpones the procedure. If they postpone it, she may not survive long enough for another window." Claire slid the severance agreement toward him. 2 weeks of standard severance. Your access has already been revoked. Security will escort you out." Ronald did not reach for the paper. He looked at the black desk, at the city beyond the window, at the woman who could have saved him with one word and chose not to. "My daughter asked me this morning if I would fix it," he whispered. "I told her I would try." Claire's mouth tightened, not with compassion, but impatience. "This meeting is over." Ronald reached into his pocket and removed his company badge, his office keys, and a worn leather keychain. A small broken silver chain dangled from the ring, old and tarnished. He placed everything on top of the termination packet. "You are not strong," he said quietly. "You are just protected, and protected people always mistake walls for courage." Richard stepped forward. "That's enough." Ronald turned toward him, then back to Claire. There was no rage left in his eyes now, only a kind of empty dignity that made the office feel smaller. I hope someday someone shows you mercy before you understand why you need it. Security took him by the arms. Ronald did not resist. He let them lead him out past the glass walls, past the assistants pretending to type, past managers who had once praised him in meetings and now avoided his eyes. His cardboard box held 12 years of service reduced to office debris, a cracked coffee mug, a faded birthday card from his team, an old notebook, and a framed photo of Lily smiling through a hospital mask. As the elevator doors closed on him, the entire executive floor went silent. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one even moved. And Claire Kensington, sitting behind the largest desk in the building, simply picked up her pen and returned to the next report. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity, grace, and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter because sometimes the quietest people carry the heaviest truth. Now, back to Ronald Sullivan. Outside, Manhattan was drowning in November rain. Ronald stood beneath the shadow of the Chrysler Building, holding the cardboard box against his chest as taxis hissed past and strangers moved around him under black umbrellas. He opened his banking app with fingers stiff from cold. Checking. $412.18. Savings, 0. Credit available, $63. He stared at the numbers until they blurred. Most men fear losing a job because it takes away pride, comfort, routine, identity. Ronald feared losing his job because it might take away his child. He had once been the kind of man people called when everything had already gone wrong. Before the office badge, before logistics reports and conference calls, he had been an FDNY paramedic, the man running toward wreckage, smoke, blood, and twisted steel while everyone else backed away. He had worked collapsed buildings in Queens, overdoses in stairwells, winter pileups on black ice, apartment fires where mothers stood barefoot in snow screaming names into the dark. He had seen people die with money in their pockets, and people live because a stranger arrived 30 seconds sooner than expected. He understood better than most that life was not fair. But Lily had made him believe it could still be beautiful. She was 7, small for her age, with dark curls, serious eyes, and a habit of asking doctors if they had eaten lunch because, as she once told Ronald, hungry people make sad choices. She loved yellow crayons, hated peas, and sang quietly when she thought nobody was listening. Her mother had died when Lily was 3, leaving Ronald with grief in one hand and a child in the other. He had built his whole life around keeping that child safe. Now, with one signature, Claire Kensington had knocked the foundation out from under him. By the time he reached Mount Sinai Kravis Children's Hospital, his shoes were soaked through and his suit clung coldly to his back. The pediatric intensive care unit smelled of disinfectant, burnt coffee, and fear. Parents slept in plastic chairs with their mouths open and their hands still resting on strollers or backpacks, as if even sleep could not fully take them away from duty. Nurses moved softly beneath blue-white lights. Machines breathed, clicked, and beeped behind glass doors. Ronald stopped outside Lily's room and made himself smile before entering, because fathers learn that sometimes love is not honesty first. Sometimes love is courage performed gently. Lily opened her eyes when he came in. She looked smaller than she had that morning. Tubes ran from her arm. A red light glowed on her finger. Her stuffed rabbit sat tucked beneath her chin with a tiny hospital bracelet made from tape. "Daddy," she whispered, "you're wet." Ronald sat beside her and took her hand carefully. New fashion. Very expensive. She smiled weakly. "Did you talk to the boss lady?" He nodded. "I did." "Did she help?" The question nearly broke him because there was still trust in it. Ronald looked down at his burned right hand wrapped around her tiny fingers. The scars across his wrist and forearm pulled tight when he moved. When Lily was little, she used to trace them and ask if dragons had done it. He always said yes. Dragons were easier than fire. Dragons were kinder than memory. "I'm still working on it," he said. Lily studied his face with the solemn wisdom of children who have spent too much time near doctors. "You say that when something is bad." Ronald tried to laugh, but no sound came out. "You know me too well." She squeezed his finger. "It's okay, Daddy. I'm not scared if you're here." He turned his face toward the window because there are rooms where even strong men cannot afford to cry. Far across the city, in a Park Avenue penthouse so quiet it felt almost religious, Claire Kensington stood alone before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. The lights in her bathroom were warm, expensive, and gentle, designed to flatter every surface. But nothing could soften what they revealed when she untied her silk robe and let it fall from her left shoulder. The entire left side of her torso was a landscape of fire. Jagged burn scars curved from her ribs over her shoulder and down toward her upper arm. Skin grafts pulled in pale ridges. Some places were shiny and tight, others dark, rough, uneven. She kept them hidden under tailored blazers, high collars, perfect posture, and an empire built with discipline so severe it passed for strength. Most nights, she could look at those scars and feel nothing. Tonight, Ronald Sullivan's words stood behind her in the mirror. "You are just protected." Protected people always mistake walls for courage. 7 years earlier, Claire had learned exactly how fragile protection was. December 2019, Interstate 95. A whiteout blizzard. She had been 27 then, already rich, already feared, already convinced that weakness was something other people suffered from because they had failed to prepare. Her chauffeur was driving her back from a failed acquisition meeting in Connecticut. Claire remembered being irritated by the snow, irritated by the delay, irritated by a board member texting her as if the world had any right to slow down. Then headlights swung sideways across the highway. A semi-truck lost control on black ice and smashed into her black Maybach, crushing the driver's side and pinning the vehicle against a concrete barrier. Her chauffeur died on impact. Claire woke in the back seat with blood running into one eye, her legs trapped beneath folded metal and the smell of gasoline filling the ruined cabin. At first, she tried to command the situation, because that was what Claire Kensington did. She shouted for help. She kicked. She reached for her phone. Then smoke poured through the dashboard. Then orange light flickered near the hood. Then heat rolled across her face and command vanished. Flames crept into the cabin like living things. Her seatbelt was jammed. Her legs would not move. Outside, cars slid past in the storm, headlights smeared by snow and panic. She screamed until smoke took her voice. That was when the window shattered inward. An arm reached through fire and broken glass. A man's voice cut through the roar. "Look at me!" She could barely see him. Snow and smoke moved around his face. He wore a dark jacket. His beard was rimed with ice. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, but his eyes were steady. "Stay with me," he said. "Keep your eyes on me." "I can't move," Claire choked. "I'll move you. The car is on fire." "I know." Flames caught his sleeve as he climbed halfway into the wreckage. He did not pull back. He tore at the crushed frame with bare hands, cut himself on glass, braced one boot against the door, and dragged her inch by inch from the back seat while she screamed from the pain of her trapped legs. Something beneath the hood exploded. The blast threw them both into the snowbank. Then he covered her with his own body, his back to the flames, his arm around her head. Claire remembered the sound he made when fire struck him. Not a scream. A broken, swallowed sound, as if he refused to give the pain the dignity of being heard. "Look at me," he rasped again, inches from her face. "You're going to make it. I promise." Claire reached for him, desperate, terrified, half-conscious. Her fingers closed around a silver medallion at his neck. Then the world went black. When she woke 3 days later in the burn unit, the stranger was gone. No name, no report, no interview. The nurses said the emergency crews had found only a broken street. Jewed medallion clutched in Claire's hand, snapped from the stranger's chain during the rescue. Patron saint of lost causes. The media called him the Blizzard Angel. Claire hated that name. Angels sounded soft. That man had not been soft. He had been steady. He had been human courage wrapped in smoke and snow. She spent years trying to find him. Private investigators, hospital records, police reports, dashcam footage destroyed by weather. Nothing. Eventually, she stopped looking, or told herself she had. Owing your life to a ghost was unbearable. Gratitude without an object becomes a wound. So she buried the medallion in a velvet box inside her private safe and built Aegis Global Logistics into a fortress large enough to hide inside. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office before sunrise. The city was still gray, the executive floor quiet, the air smelling faintly of coffee and polished stone. Richard Vale entered with the confidence of a man who believed yesterday had gone exactly as planned. "I assume you want the Sullivan termination records finalized," he said. Claire removed her gloves. "I want his full employment file." Richard blinked. "Legal already reviewed it." "I didn't ask what legal reviewed." His smile tightened. "Of course." He placed a thick folder on her desk. Claire opened it without sitting. Performance reviews? Excellent. Crisis response? Excellent. Employee retention under his department? Excellent. Client satisfaction? 98%. She frowned. Why was this man not on any corrective plan? Richard folded his hands. Until the Frankfurt incident, he was useful. Claire looked up. Useful? That is what employees are, Claire. Useful until they are not. Something cold moved behind her ribs, but she said nothing. She turned the page. Previous employment. FDNY. Emergency Medical Services. Yonkers District. Reason for departure. Honorable medical discharge following off-duty rescue incident. Her eyes slowed. Thermal injuries. Upper back. Right arm. December 2019. Interstate 95 corridor. The room seemed to tilt by 1 invisible inch. Claire turned another page. Medical accommodation request. Ergonomic chair. Restricted overhead lifting. Chronic nerve sensitivity from third-degree burns sustained during vehicle fire rescue. Her fingers went numb. Richard said something, but his voice came from far away. Vehicle fire rescue, December 2019, Interstate 95. No, she whispered. Richard leaned forward. Miss Kensington? Claire stood so quickly her chair struck the glass behind her. Where are his belongings? His desk box? Security holding. We were going to mail it. Bring it to me. Claire, with respect. Now. 5 minutes later, a cardboard box sat on the same desk where Ronald had begged for his daughter's life. Claire opened it herself. A coffee mug. A child's drawing. A cracked notebook. A laminated saint. Jude prayer card. A hospital schedule with Lily Sullivan written across the top. Her movements became less controlled. She lifted papers, pens, old receipts, a small framed photo of Lily in a yellow hat. Then she found the keys. Apartment key, mailbox key, an old brass key shaped like a heart, and the broken silver chain. Claire lifted it slowly. The world went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The city outside vanished. The office vanished. The hum of the ventilation vanished. The chain was thick, tarnished, snapped at the end. Her hand shook once. Only once. Then she crossed to the hidden wall safe, opened it with trembling fingers, and removed the velvet box. Inside lay the St. Jude medallion. The broken clasp matched. Exactly. The metal remembered what she had forgotten. Ronald Sullivan. The man she had dismissed as a broken link. The man whose insurance she had cut off with one signature. The man who had pulled her from fire, covered her body with his own, and vanished without asking for a reward. He had been standing in front of her yesterday, begging not for himself, but for his child. Claire gripped the edge of the desk as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. Richard stepped closer. "What is this?" Claire looked at him slowly. Why was his insurance cancellation processed immediately? Richard stiffened. Standard executive termination protocol. Standard severance includes continuation coverage. In most cases. In every case. Richard's jaw tightened. Given the scale of the Frankfurt incident, I coded it under gross operational negligence. The board wanted decisive action. Claire placed the medallion beside the broken chain. It lay on the black desk like a witness. "No," she said softly. "You wanted a scapegoat." Richard's face hardened. "I protected the company. You protected yourself." She picked up her phone. "Get my car." Richard stepped into her path. "Claire, whatever emotional connection you think you've discovered, slow down. Going after Sullivan now creates exposure, legal exposure, financial exposure, reputational exposure." Claire stared at him. "A child may die because of what we did. Because of what he did. Move. If you walk into that hospital, you turn him into a symbol. If he becomes a symbol, the board asks questions. If the board asks questions, they may wonder why you trusted him in the first place." Claire's voice dropped. "Are you threatening me?" Richard did not blink. "I am protecting your empire." For a moment, Claire thought of the years she had spent building that empire, the acquisitions, the sleepless nights, the interviews, the cover stories, the way people feared her and mistook that fear for respect. Then she looked at the medallion, and all of it seemed suddenly small. "An empire that cannot protect a 7-year-old girl," she said, "is not an empire. It is a machine." Then she walked out. At Mount Sinai, Ronald Sullivan stood in the pediatric billing office with both hands pressed flat against the counter, trying not to collapse. A financial administrator in a gray suit spoke softly, each word coated in professional sympathy. "Mr. Sullivan, I am very sorry, but the insurer has confirmed termination of your corporate policy as of yesterday afternoon." Ronald stared at him. "That's not possible. There is supposed to be continuation coverage." "In many cases, yes, but your employer coded the separation under gross operational negligence. The suspension is immediate pending review." Ronald's mouth opened, but no sound came. "Her transplant is scheduled." "I understand." "No," Ronald said, leaning forward. "You don't. Her immune system is gone. The donor window is now. If this gets delayed, she might not make it long enough for another match." The administrator lowered his eyes. "Without coverage or full payment authorization, the hospital cannot proceed with the current transplant plan." Ronald gave a short laugh. It was a terrible sound, empty and cracked. "How much?" "For the procedure, post-operative isolation, medications, physician fees, and projected complications." "How much?" "Approximately $680,000 to begin." Ronald looked through the glass wall toward Lily's room. She was asleep, one hand curled around her stuffed rabbit. He pressed his fist against his mouth. "Take me," he said. The administrator blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Test me. Marrow, kidney, blood, anything. Sell whatever part of me can be used. I'll sign it over. I'll pay forever." "Mr. Sullivan, she is 7. "I know." Ronald's voice broke through the hallway. "No, you don't know. You don't know how she sings when she thinks nobody can hear her. You don't know how she puts ketchup on eggs and calls it gourmet. You don't know how she asks nurses if they had lunch because she thinks hungry people make sad choices. She is not an invoice." The administrator said nothing. Parents nearby turned away, not because they were indifferent, but because some pain is too holy to stare at. Then a voice cut across the hallway. "No, she isn't." Ronald turned. Claire Kensington stood 20 feet away, soaked from rain, her hair loosened from its perfect shape, her expensive suit dark with water, her face stripped of all corporate armor. For 1 second, Ronald thought exhaustion had made him imagine her. Then rage came, bright enough to hold him upright. "You," he said. Claire walked toward him. Ronald stepped between her and Lily's door. "No, you don't get to come near her." "Ronald, do not say my name. I came to help." "Help?" He almost laughed. "Did you come to inspect the damage? Is that what powerful people do after they finish someone? They visit the wreckage?" Claire flinched, and Ronald was glad. Let it land. Let one word hurt her the way her signature had hurt him. Claire turned to the administrator and removed a black card from her coat. "My name is Claire Kensington. I am personally guaranteeing every medical expense for Lily Sullivan. The transplant, isolation, medication, physician fees, recovery, complications, anything her doctors request." The administrator stared at the card. "Ms. Kensington, that is extremely generous, but what?" A doctor stepped from Lily's room. Dr. Elias Moreno, pediatric hematology, surgical cap in one hand, exhaustion in his eyes. Money is no longer the only issue. Ronald's face drained. What happened? Dr. Moreno looked at him with real sorrow. The primary donor failed final clearance. An infection marker came back positive. "We cannot use the marrow." Ronald gripped the back of a chair. "No. There is a secondary donor," the doctor said quickly. "A strong partial match in Oslo, Norway. But under normal transport protocols, it would take at least 72 hours to harvest, certify, clear customs, and transport the product here." Claire stepped closer. "And Lily?" The doctor looked through the glass. 48 hours before organ failure becomes likely. Less if she develops infection." The hallway narrowed. Ronald heard nothing but the monitor inside Lily's room. Beep, beep, beep. Claire's eyes changed. It was the look her competitors had feared for years, but this time it was not pointed at money. It was pointed at death. "Doctor," she said, "what exactly needs to move?" "A harvested marrow product in a certified cryogenic medical transport container under chain of custody from Oslo University Hospital to this operating room." "Can surgical prep begin if the product is confirmed in transit?" "Yes, but then prep her." "Ms. Kensington, you cannot simply—" "I own the largest private medical logistics network in the Atlantic corridor. I move transplant hearts through hurricanes, vaccine lots through closed borders, and surgical equipment through customs systems most governments barely understand. Tell Oslo to prepare the donor. Tell your transplant coordinator to stay on the phone. Tell your legal department I will indemnify this hospital personally." Ronald stared at her. This was madness. Beautiful madness. Claire removed her phone. "And get me a room with a screen." For the next 16 hours, the pediatric waiting room became a command center. A conference table filled with laptops, chargers, coffee cups, flight maps, customs documents, medical forms, and cold sandwiches nobody touched. Claire stood in the center of it in a wrinkled suit, running the operation with a ferocity that made even doctors move faster. Oslo confirmed the donor. Aegis activated an emergency aircraft. A snow system threatened the North Atlantic route. Claire rerouted. A fuel crew in Iceland hesitated. Claire called the owner. A customs officer demanded documentation. Claire had it translated, stamped, signed, and transmitted in 4 minutes. Through it all, Ronald sat outside Lily's room, watching the woman he hated fight for the child he loved. He did not forgive her. Not yet. Forgiveness was not a button. It did not switch on because money moved, but he saw something he had not expected. Claire did not sit. She did not eat. She did not change clothes. She stood beneath hospital lights with 2 phones in her hands, fighting as if Lily's next breath belonged to her too. At 2:13 a.m., Richard Vale arrived at the hospital in a charcoal overcoat, carrying the cold authority of the boardroom into a place where authority meant nothing beside a child's failing body. Claire was on a call with Oslo when he entered. "No, listen carefully," she said into the phone. "That container does not enter standard cargo. It stays with the medical courier's hands at all times. If anyone tells you otherwise, put me on speaker." Richard waited until she ended the call. "This has gone far enough." Claire did not look at him. "Leave. You are using company assets for a personal emotional crisis. I am using my personal aircraft, my personal guarantee, and my authority as CEO. The board will not see it that way. The board can call me after the child survives." Richard lowered his voice. "The child is not the issue." Ronald stood slowly from the chair outside Lily's room. Claire's eyes flicked toward him, then back to Richard. "Say that again," she said. Richard realized too late that half the waiting room had gone quiet. Nurses, parents, a janitor with a mop, a young resident holding a clipboard. All of them turned toward the man in the expensive overcoat. Richard adjusted his cuffs. "I mean only that the future of Aegis cannot depend on one employee's personal tragedy." Ronald took 1 step forward. "One employee." Richard looked at him with faint disgust. "Mr. Sullivan, this is exactly why emotion should not drive logistics." Ronald said nothing. That silence was heavier than shouting. Richard turned back to Claire. "You built this company by being ruthless. Do not throw it away because guilt has confused you." Claire went very still. "Guilt has not confused me. It has awakened me. You are making him into a hero because it comforts you." Claire reached into her pocket and closed her fingers around the St. Jude medallion. She had not shown Ronald yet. Not here. Not like this. But Richard had become something larger than an executive. He had become the voice of everything she had mistaken for strength. "You coded his termination to kill his coverage immediately," Claire said. "You withheld continuation options. You used his daughter as leverage to protect your report." Richard's jaw tightened. He failed. He was in the ICU watching his child die. And while he was there, a shipment failed. Then our system failed. "No," Richard snapped. "People fail. Weak people fail. That is why strong companies cut them loose." The waiting room went silent, completely silent. Even the monitors seemed softer. A mother holding a sleeping toddler stared at Richard as if he had spoken in a foreign language made of ice. Claire looked around the room, and for the first time in years, she understood the difference between silence born of fear and silence born of moral clarity. "Security," she said. 2 hospital security officers moved closer. Richard's face flushed. "Claire, don't be theatrical. Richard Vale, you are suspended pending internal investigation for policy manipulation, benefits interference, and deliberate misconduct." His mouth opened. "You cannot suspend me in a hospital hallway." Claire stepped close enough that only he and the people nearest could hear. "Watch me." Richard looked at Ronald. "You think she cares about you? You are a symbol to her. A redemption project. Nothing more." Ronald's scarred hand tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Maybe. But right now, She is the only powerful person in this hallway using her power to save a child. Richard had no answer. Hospital security escorted him out past the vending machines, past the parents, past the janitor holding his mop still against the floor. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the silence followed him like a judgment. At 5:41 a.m., the donor marrow left Oslo in a certified cryogenic container, handcuffed to a medical courier. At 8:06 a.m., Claire's aircraft crossed the Atlantic above a storm line, flying a route no commercial carrier would have approved. At 10:32 a.m., the plane descended toward Teterboro through heavy cloud. At 10:48 a.m., the helicopter lifted from the tarmac, the medical courier strapped beside the silver case. At 11:07 a.m., Ronald and Claire stood on the hospital roof in the wind as the helicopter appeared between buildings. Neither of them spoke. The rotors thundered. Rain whipped across the landing pad. Claire's hair blew across her face. Ronald's hands shook openly now. When the courier jumped down with the case, Dr. Moreno's team rushed forward. The silver container passed from hand to hand like a sacred object. As the elevator doors closed on the surgical team, Ronald leaned against the wall and covered his face. Claire stood 3 feet away, drenched, exhausted, empty. She had moved half the world in 16 hours. Now there was nothing to move but time. And time, for all her money, still would not obey her. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Ronald sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Claire sat across from him, the St. Jude medallion hidden in her palm, the broken chain wrapped around her fingers. Every so often, Ronald looked at her as if trying to understand what kind of person could destroy a man in the morning and fight like heaven for his daughter by nightfall. Claire had no answer. She barely understood herself. At last, Dr. Moreno appeared at the end of the hallway. Ronald stood so quickly his chair scraped backward. Claire stood too. The doctor pulled down his mask. His eyes were tired, but there was something warm in them. "The marrow is in," he said. "She made it through surgery." Ronald's whole body seemed to fold around the words. "She's alive?" "She is alive. The next days are critical, but she is stable." Ronald covered his mouth. His shoulders shook once, then again. Claire closed her eyes. She had signed 1,000-page contracts without trembling. She had acquired competitors without blinking. She had faced shareholders, senators, regulators, and rivals with a steady pulse. But that one sentence, "She is alive," broke something open in her chest. Later, in the quiet after the surgery, Ronald found Claire standing alone near the chapel at the end of the pediatric wing. The lights were dim there. A row of small electric candles glowed beneath a stained glass window. Claire still wore the same suit, now wrinkled and stained from rain and sleeplessness. Without the boardroom, without the desk, without the glass walls and polished stone, she looked almost young. Ronald stopped a few feet away. "Why?" he asked. Claire turned. Her face tightened as if she had been expecting the question and fearing it. "Because I was wrong. Wrong people apologize. They don't spend millions flying bone marrow across an ocean." Claire opened her hand. The St. Jude medallion lay in her palm, its broken chain hanging from her fingers. Ronald stared at it. All the air left his lungs. His hand went instinctively to his pocket, where his keys used to hang, where the other half of that chain had been for years. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. Claire's voice broke. "December 2019, Interstate 95, whiteout blizzard. A semi crushed my car against the barrier. The fuel tank ignited. I was trapped in the back seat." Ronald stepped back as if memory itself had struck him. Snow, fire, broken glass, a woman coughing in smoke, his own sleeve burning, the medallion snapping at his throat. Claire slowly unbuttoned the top of her blouse and pulled the fabric away from her left shoulder. Under the hospital light, Ronald saw the scars, not hidden beneath wealth, not softened by distance, real, jagged, familiar, the mirror image of the burns that crossed his own back and arm. "You shielded me," Claire whispered. Tears filled her eyes and spilled before she could stop them. "You covered me when the car exploded. You told me to look at you. You promised I would make it. I woke up 3 days later with this in my hand, and you were gone." Ronald could not speak. For 7 years, that night had lived inside him as pain without a face. He had saved someone in a storm, lost the life he knew, left the hospital before reporters found him, and returned home to a toddler who needed her father more than the world needed a hero. He had never known the woman's name. He had never asked for money. He had never wanted applause. He had simply done what a human being should do when another human being is burning. "You were the woman in the car," he breathed. Claire nodded, crying openly now. Not like a CEO, not like an icon, but like someone finally crushed by the weight of her own blindness. "I spent years looking for you. Then I became someone who could stand in front of you and not even see you. Yesterday, you begged me to save your daughter, and I called you a broken chain." Her voice failed. She forced it back. "You took the fire that was meant for me, and I almost let my signature take your child. I am so sorry, Ronald. I am so sorry." The hallway had gone quiet. A nurse stood near the medication station, frozen. A doctor paused with a chart in his hand. A janitor at the far end stopped pushing his cart. No one meant to listen, but everyone heard enough. Ronald looked at Claire, at the medallion, at the scars she had hidden from a world that praised her armor. He thought of Lily upstairs, alive because this woman had fought with everything she had. He thought of himself yesterday, humiliated in front of glass walls. He thought of the fire and the snow and the promise he had made to a stranger. "You're going to make it." Slowly, he reached out and closed Claire's fingers around the medallion. "I didn't save you because you were important," he said. Claire bowed her head. "I know. I saved you because you were alive." She cried harder then. Ronald's own eyes filled, but his voice remained steady. "And today, you saved Lily for the same reason." Claire looked up. "Can you ever forgive me?" Ronald was silent for a long time. Forgiveness did not erase cruelty. It did not rewrite the moment security dragged him away. It did not make fear disappear. But Lily was alive. Claire was standing before him with her armor broken, and Ronald had learned from fire that some things must be released, or they keep burning long after the flames are gone. "Not all at once," he said, "but I can begin." Claire covered her mouth. Ronald opened his arms. She stepped into them slowly, as if she did not believe she deserved the shelter. He held her carefully, his scarred hands against her shaking shoulders. For a moment, the billionaire and the single father stood in a hospital hallway beneath fluorescent lights, both marked by the same fire, both saved by the same grace, while the people around them watched in complete silence. 2 months later, the Aegis Global Logistics boardroom was full when Claire Kensington walked in. The obsidian desk gleamed beneath the morning light. The same glass walls looked out over Manhattan. The same executives sat in tailored suits, waiting for numbers. Strategy, control, but Claire was not the same woman who had once mistaken control for courage. She wore a cream blazer today, lower at the collar than usual. A small portion of scar tissue showed near her left shoulder. She did not hide it. The room noticed, but no one dared comment. Behind her walked Ronald Sullivan in a tailored navy suit, rested, steady, and visibly uncomfortable with attention. He would have preferred to be at the hospital, where Lily had just been cleared for outpatient recovery. She was still fragile, still masked in public, still facing months of treatment, but she was alive. That morning she had eaten half a pancake and declared it almost gourmet. To Ronald, that was a miracle large enough to humble heaven. Claire took her seat at the head of the table, then remained standing. "Before we discuss quarterly numbers," she said, "we are going to discuss what this company is." One board member shifted, another glanced at the agenda. Claire continued, "Aegis Global Logistics was built to move what matters: medicine, equipment, emergency infrastructure, human possibility. Somewhere along the way, I allowed myself to believe that moving life-saving things mattered more than protecting the lives of the people who move them." The room went still. Ronald looked down at his hands. Claire placed a folder on the table. "Effective immediately, Richard Vale has been removed from all operational authority pending external investigation. We have identified deliberate manipulation of employee termination codes, benefits suppression, and retaliatory documentation practices." A murmur moved through the room. Claire did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Also effective immediately, Aegis will establish a fully funded catastrophic medical relief foundation for every employee and dependent in our global network. No child of an Aegis employee will lose life-saving care because a parent made one mistake during a family emergency. No employee will be forced to choose between answering a company phone and holding the hand of someone they love." Silence. Deep. Heavy. The kind of silence that enters a room when truth arrives overdressed as policy. A board member cleared his throat. "Claire, the cost of such a program will be less than the cost of becoming a company without a soul." No one spoke after that. Claire turned slightly toward Ronald. "I have also asked Ronald Sullivan to return as Chief Operations Officer." Ronald looked up sharply. He had not agreed to the title when she first offered it. He had told her he needed time. He had told her he would not be bought. Claire had said she understood. What she offered now was not charity, and everyone in the room needed to understand that. "Mr. Sullivan has spent years building the most reliable regional medical logistics system in this company," Claire said. "He has led with discipline, humility, and humanity. Yesterday's culture punished him for being a father. Tomorrow's culture will learn from him how to be better." Ronald stood slowly. The board turned toward him. He did not give a speech. That was not his way. He simply said, "If I come back, we build systems that remember people are human before they become mistakes." Claire nodded. "That is exactly why you are coming back." For a moment, no one moved. Then the oldest board member, a woman who had watched Claire build Aegis from its first warehouse lease, began to clap once. Then again. Slowly, the room followed. Ronald did not smile widely. He only lowered his eyes, overwhelmed, while Claire watched him with something deeper than gratitude. Respect. That afternoon, Ronald left work early. For the first time in years, he did not apologize for it. He walked into Central Park beneath pale winter sunlight, where Lily waited on a bench wearing a yellow knit hat and a medical mask decorated with tiny stars. Claire stood beside her, holding 3 paper cups of hot chocolate. She looked uncertain in the open air, away from glass walls and assistants and controlled rooms. Lily waved weakly but happily. "Daddy." "Ms. Claire got marshmallows, but she said only 2 each because sugar is a governance issue." Ronald laughed, really laughed, and the sound startled Claire with its warmth. "That sounds like her." Lily looked between them. "Are you friends now?" Ronald glanced at Claire. Claire looked down at the medallion resting against her collarbone, repaired on a new chain but still bearing the mark where it had once broken. "We're learning," she said. Lily considered this with great seriousness. "That's good. People should learn before they get old." Ronald smiled. Wise advice. They walked slowly through the park, careful of Lily's strength. No reporters, no grand announcement, no Ayuk orchestra swelling beneath the trees. Just a father, a daughter, and a woman who had finally discovered that power without mercy is only another kind of poverty. Near the pond, Lily slipped her small hand into Claire's. Claire froze for half a second, as if she had been handed something more fragile than any company she had ever owned. Then she held on. Ronald saw it and said nothing. Some miracles do not need speeches. Some redemption arrives quietly, in a child's trust, in a repaired chain, in a second chance no one could have earned, but everyone can honor. Years later, people at Aegis would still talk about the day the Iron Queen changed. They would talk about the hospital, the flight from Oslo, the boardroom silence, the single father who returned not as a victim, but as a leader. But Ronald never told the story that way. When Lily asked him why he had saved Claire all those years ago, he simply told her the truth. Because she needed help. And when Claire heard that answer, she understood at last what dignity really was. It was not loud. It did not demand applause. It did not need a title, a fortune, or a perfect record. Dignity was a man standing in fire for a stranger. Dignity was a father begging without shame for his child. Dignity was the courage to forgive slowly, honestly, without pretending the wound had never existed. And grace, real grace, was what happened when the world finally grew quiet enough to see him. Life often tests us in ways we never anticipate, revealing the strength hidden within ordinary moments. The story of Ronald Sullivan and Claire Kensington is a powerful reminder that courage and compassion are not always loud or visible. They are choices we make when stakes are highest. Ronald, a father desperate to save his daughter, faced unimaginable pressure when his job was threatened at the very moment his child needed him most. Claire, a woman accustomed to control and power, initially made a decision guided by protocol rather than empathy. Yet, through a series of trials that spanned fire, ice, and the weight of corporate bureaucracy, both discovered that true strength is not measured by titles, wealth, or authority. It is measured by the willingness to act with humanity even when the world demands otherwise. The lesson is clear. Never underestimate the quiet heroism that resides in ordinary people, nor the transformative power of mercy and understanding. We are all protected in different ways, but real courage comes when we step beyond our walls and recognize the value of human dignity. What about you? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's compassion changed everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story touched you, hit subscribe to follow more stories that remind us what really matters in life.